Welcome back to Bookkast, bringing you bestsellers all in minutes. I'm Paul.
I am Sarah.
And we are diving deep today
We are.
into a listener request.
Yes.
Kat Bohannon's Eve. How the female body drove 200 million years of human evolution.
Such a fascinating book.
It is, and I can see why it's a bestseller. I mean, it's just packed with so much stuff you just don't think about biology, about our evolutionary past. Really makes you rethink things.
Really does.
And today our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to unpack some of the most thought-provoking ideas from Bohannon's research. I love that she takes this approach of the female body and really puts it front and center in shaping human history, in ways you might not have even considered.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting concepts I thought that she starts right out with that kind of lays the groundwork for so much of the book is she calls it the male norm problem in scientific research.
Right.
And so she goes on to point out that a lot of scientific studies have really focused on male subjects.
Yeah.
And historically, and even today.
Yeah, and it's not just like mice and stuff. It's even like clinical trials.
Oh, yeah.
Like in the U.S., regulations since the 1970s, like strongly advised against including women of childbearing age.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a huge chunk of the population.
It is. It really is.
That's just,
And now you just wonder if there's just so much we don't know.
Right. Because you're basing, our whole understanding of like human biology and medicine is based on studies that are largely excluding half the population.
Yeah, like how do you even know what you don't know? You're just assuming that it's all the same.
Right. And one of the examples that she gives in the book is how men and women respond to general anesthesia. And it wasn't until 1999
Wow.
that researchers even really looked into that. And guess what?
Why?
Women wake up faster, regardless of age, weight, dosage.
So they've been overdosing us for...
Right. It makes you think. And the crazy thing is that wasn't even what they were studying. It was they were trying to test a new EEG monitor. Yeah. So it's just kind of an accidental discovery.
It was.
That's wild. I mean, you think about all the different, medical treatments and dosages and things that have been, tested and determined based on this male norm. And are they even right for women?
You really have to wonder. And so she really questions this idea of clean science.
Yeah.
If you're only looking at half of the data,
Yeah.
Can you really say that it's clean?
And it's not just an academic thing, it really has these real world health implications.
Totally.
I love that she points out, that scientists often get really kind of focused on their own narrow lane, and you have to kind of look at the big picture to see these patterns, and she had to really connect a lot of dots from different fields to come to these conclusions.
Right.
And one of the cool things about the book is she kind of traces this evolutionary journey through these Eves.
Yes.
And now when she says Eve, I mean...
It's not like a biblical Eve.
Right. She doesn't mean like there's this one, the one first woman. She's talking about the originators of certain traits, Exactly.
Huh?
And she goes way back, millions of years, to pinpoint these crucial female ancestors. I thought this was so cool. She talks about Donna. Protungulatum Donnae,
Yeah.
a creature that lived 67 to 63 million years ago. And she says this is the Eve of placental mammals.
Right.
So that's us, anybody with a uterus, that was her. She was the originator of that.
Donna.
Which is so cool. And that this emergence of Donna coincided with, that massive asteroid.
The one that wiped out the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
The non-avian dinosaurs, at least.
Yeah. So this cataclysmic event is kind of what led to our lineage.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
It really is.
And then she goes even further back, 200 million years ago, to Morgie. Morganuccanon.
That's a mouthful.
And she's an early type of mammalia form. And what's cool about her is she laid soft, leathery eggs. Unlike, the dinosaurs had hard-shelled eggs.
Right.
And it's just amazing to think about how these seemingly small differences had these huge evolutionary consequences.
Huge ripple effects, yeah.
Millions of years later.
Totally.
So then she gets into this whole thing about nipples and breast milk.
A real turning point.
Right, which seems like it was such just a crucial thing for mammals.
It is.
That they could nourish their young in a more direct and nurturing way.
For sure.
And so the evolution of nipples sometime between 200 and 100 million years ago,
Wow.
led to a way more efficient way for infants to get nourishment.
I mean, breast milk is so much more than just food.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, you know that. You've raised kids. It's just amazing stuff.
It is.
And she talks about colostrum.
Colostrum, yeah.
That early milk that's produced after birth, it's full of antibodies. It helps with the baby's immune system. And it even helps them go to the bathroom.
It's a laxative.
Yeah, so.
Helps them pass that meconium.
That first poop.
The first poop, yeah.
That terry black stuff.
Yeah, I remember those days.
I know. It's nature's little medicine, first dose of medicine.
It really is.
And then you've got oligosaccharides.
Yes.
Those are the complex sugars that are in there.
And that's not even for the babies, really.
Yeah, I know. It's so cool. It's to feed the good bacteria.
Your gut.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So smart.
And so, and they help prevent dangerous pathogens from attaching to the intestinal wall. It's just like this whole defense system.
So amazing. And you know what else?
What?
Breast milk can actually change based on the mother's environment.
Oh, yeah.
And diet. It's so crazy.
It's adapting.
It's adapting to give the baby exactly what it needs for that environment.
I know. Like, even in different seasons or whatever, or if you live in the tropics or in an Arctic climate, like, it adjusts.
It's wild.
It's wild. And of course, the physical act of suckling is so important too.
Yeah.
Right? She even talks about how, the sugar content and the frequency of nursing can actually affect the baby's energy levels.
Oh, wow.
And potentially even their social development.
Like if a baby nurses less often, or the milk is lower in sugar,
they might conserve more energy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. So then she gets into this whole mystery of breasts.
Yes.
In human females, which, unlike most other primates,
right,
our prominent breasts aren't actually directly involved in milk production or storage.
Yeah, they don't really need to be that big.
Right. It's the added fat tissue, the adipose tissue, and that's kind of a recent development in our lineage.
Like within the last 5 to 7 million years.
Yeah.
After we split from chimps.
So after chimps.
Yeah.
I know. It's kind of crazy to think about that we don't really, for such a defining physical characteristic, we don't know exactly when that happened or the specific genes that control it. So weird.
It's this evolutionary mystery,
Totally.
So, okay, now something that you think would be a little bit more straightforward, but it's not, is just heterosexual mechanics.
Right.
And she points out some pretty crazy evolutionary trade-offs in that area.
It does.
I thought this was so funny. She points out that while the vagina does expand during arousal,
right,
a fully aroused vagina, on average, is still not as deep as an erect penis.
You'd think it would be, right?
Right. I mean, come on, evolution. You can't get that right.
Right. I know. How did that happen?
So it's just kind of a reminder that, evolution isn't always perfect. It's not always this perfect engineering feat.
And it's not always a lock and key.
Right. And then she also talks about the fact that human males don't have a baculum.
Right. That penis bone.
Yeah, penis bone, which a lot of other mammals do have.
They do.
But we rely solely on just, blood flow and tissue.
Right, turgid tissue. Yeah, which can lead to penile fractures, she says, and erectile dysfunction, which is, relatively common. So you wonder, like, what was the evolutionary advantage to not having this bone?
Right. I mean, it seems like it would be helpful.
Yeah.
Right.
She talks about the rhinoceros.
Oh, yeah.
That has this super long lightning bolt shaped penis.
I know. I can't even imagine.
I know, that matches the female's vagina, which is all, really complicated and convoluted.
So it makes you wonder, it's so different depending on the animal and what their
evolutionary needs
are. Yeah.
All right, so another big evolutionary thing is the placenta.
The placenta, our internal eggshell.
I love how she puts that.
Me too.
That's a really clear way to think about it.
It is.
So she explains how the uterus itself evolved from the shell gland of our egg-laying ancestors.
Yeah, way back.
So we've just internalized this whole process.
Totally.
That used to be external, which is, it's kind of mind-blowing.
It is.
And, she talks about the timing of the placenta's evolution, which is interesting.
Like around the time of the asteroid?
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
So crazy. That wiped out the dinosaurs.
Right.
But its exact function back then is still kind of a mystery.
Yeah, they don't really know.
So, okay, then she gets into the shape of the uterus.
Yeah.
And she talks about how our primate ancestors had a uterus that was semi-divided.
Right.
And it's interesting that 1 in 350 human girls are actually born with 2 uteri and cervixes.
I know. It's like this little throwback to our ancient anatomy.
To the past.
Yeah.
All right. Pregnancy. That's a whole thing.
Not always straightforward.
No. She describes it as a temporary detente or even a bloody stalemate.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's because of what's known as the maternal-fetal conflict. So, I mean, you've got the mother's body having to basically tolerate this foreign entity, you know.
It's a little parasite.
Yeah, and trying to keep its own systems in check.
Right.
And not be overwhelmed.
It's a battle.
It is a battle.
Totally.
And, you know, and she goes on to talk about proteins like syncytin and TP13 that play this really crucial role, and how if there are imbalances, it can lead to things like preeclampsia.
Yeah, it's a high stakes negotiation going on.
It is.
Between mother and baby.
Between the two. It's amazing that more pregnancies don't have problems.
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of miraculous, you know.
Yeah.
All right, so going back to our primate ancestry.
Way back.
She talks about little creatures like purgi that lived in the Paleogene period, you know, after the dinosaur.
After the dinosaur.
And that's when some really cool key sensory adaptations started to emerge.
Like our vision.
Yeah, like our vision. So, you know, they were shifting towards life in the trees.
Right.
And so they needed better depth perception.
Yeah, they needed to see those, you know, branches and everything and be able to judge distances.
Yeah.
And catch those bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so binocular vision was really important. And, you know, so having both eyes on the front of the head like we do.
Like owls.
Like owls.
Like bats.
And bats.
Yeah.
So it's a great example of convergent evolution, you know.
It really is.
Where different species are facing similar pressures, they evolve in similar ways.
Totally.
And then as those eye sockets move to the front,
the brain got bigger.
The
visual processing areas.
Yeah, because you've got all this information coming in.
Right.
You're going to process it.
Exactly.
So then color vision. Developed.
Seeing red.
Why red?
Well, you know, a lot of those primates were eating fruit. And red fruit is a lot easier to spot amongst all the green leaves.
So it gave them a real advantage.
Yeah.
In their environment.
And so many other mammals.
Yeah.
You know, they don't even see all the colors that we see. They only see, you know, like 2 colors or even just shades of gray.
Right.
Their world is a lot less colorful than ours.
It's so wild to think about. This was another cool thing that I didn't know. You know, she estimates that as many as 12% of human girls may be born with tetrachromatic vision.
What?
So they see even more colors than we do.
That's so cool.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
But, you know, she says it may never fully develop or be utilized if it's not stimulated.
Right.
So who knows what kind of, you know, latent abilities we have.
I know, right?
And then we get to, you know, the big shift.
Yeah.
Bipedalism.
Standing up.
Walking on 2 legs.
About
4.4 million years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, that had a big impact, especially on the female body.
It's huge.
Anatomically. So, you know, we went from a grasping hand to a weight-bearing foot.
Right.
So now we've got bunions. And she points out that women tend to have a greater Q angle in their hips.
Right, the angle between the thigh bone and the lower leg.
Yeah, so we're more prone to bunions.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, you think about men, they tend to develop more upper body muscle mass.
Right.
But women can have really strong legs.
Oh, yeah.
And she argues that was really important, you know, back in the day when early hominids were having to walk and jog and move around to forage and just survive.
For sure.
And she talks about this really fascinating thing called the metabolic second wind.
Yeah.
Where the female body can actually utilize lipids, you know, fat, as an energy source more efficiently.
So we've got more endurance.
Yeah, so we've got more stamina.
Right.
For those long periods of, you know, activity.
Yeah, we can just keep going.
So, you know, we're tough, you know? And then, you know, when you think about babies.
baby.
Hominin babies.
Yeah.
They're needy.
They're needy.
More so than some of the earlier,
Than some of the earlier Eves.
Like Morgie's babies. I don't know.
Right.
They were probably just, off doing their own thing.
They were probably fine.
Right.
Yeah.
But hominin babies needed more care.
So that means more pressure on the mothers.
Yeah.
Right.
And so she argues that this might have contributed to more complex social structure.
Yeah, more cooperation.
More cooperation, yeah.
We had to work together to take care of these needy babies.
So, and she also talks about, traditional perceptions of women being weaker.
Right.
And she's like, no. And she uses this really great example of Captain Kristen Graced.
Yes.
Who completed Army Ranger School.
So tough.
I know. And, she was carrying male soldiers and equipment. And Bohannon points out that when you control for size and body composition, the strength of men and women is comparable.
Yeah.
And then, you think about endurance events, like ultra marathon.
Yeah, those crazy long races.
Yeah, women often do better.
We do.
Than men.
Yeah.
So we've got stamina.
We do.
And then, okay, so this is interesting too. She kind of compares human social structures to bonobos.
Oh yeah.
To give us some insight into the potential evolution of gynecology.
So bonobos.
Bonobos
Yeah.
are known for their female-dominated societies.
Right.
And they have these really strong female alliances. They kind of stick together.
They do.
And they exhibit behaviors that are similar to midwifery.
Yeah.
Where the females will assist during birth.
Yeah, they help each other out.
And they'll even share the placenta.
Isn't that wild?
I know, it's very different from chimpanzees, which are more male-dominated.
Right.
And so she suggests that, early hominid birthing practices might have been more like the bonobos.
So cool.
Yeah, so more communal,
Yeah.
and supportive.
Yeah.
And all right, so then you've got these hominin Eves
Mm-hmm.
that are migrating out of Africa.
Right.
And, they're facing some real reproductive hurdles.
Challenges.
Yeah, challenges. So, you've got these small populations
Yeah.
venturing into new territories, and they're probably experiencing higher rates of pregnancy loss, due to stress.
Environmental stressors.
And just, the limited genetic diversity.
Yeah.
And she thinks that this might explain why there weren't that many successful migrations,
Right.
early on.
And why we're all so closely related.
Yeah, and why we're so closely related.
Yeah.
So, it was a real bottleneck there.
It was.
Okay, the brain.
A brain.
The brain.
So fascinating.
Yeah.
So she talks about how the female brain actually changes during and after pregnancy.
Right.
Significantly.
Yeah.
And so the areas of the brain that deal with, emotional attachment and learning new stuff and memory, they actually show a decrease in volume during pregnancy.
What?
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Like it shrinks.
Yeah, and they think it's to make space for new information and new connections related to motherhood.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's like decluttering.
Yeah.
Making room.
To make room.
Exactly. For the baby.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And then new mothers, they also experience, higher levels of anxiety and vigilance.
Which makes sense.
It makes sense.
They're protecting their offspring.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of tied in there.
It is.
Okay. And then she talks about sexism.
Sexism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she kind of proposes that a lot of, what we see as sexism throughout history, even today, can be viewed as these cultural controls on women's bodies and reproduction.
Right. And that's a really, kind of a difficult thing to swallow sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
But she does make some interesting points.
Yeah, she does. I mean, and she's not saying that it's right.
No, not at all.
No.
But she's saying that, these things, these cultural controls may have served a purpose back in the day.
Right. Like before we had, modern medicine.
Right.
And birth control.
Right.
And all that.
Like, you got to manage population, disease is spreading.
Sources. Yeah.
And so she uses examples like, taboos around female promiscuity.
Yeah.
And early marriage.
Right.
In some cultures.
Yeah.
But she also points out that they often had these unintended negative consequences.
Right.
They hindered disease prevention and just didn't allow women to really, be empowered.
Yeah, to reach their full potential.
Yeah.
To reach their full potential. And so she ends with this really powerful argument about the importance of investing in the health and education and economic empowerment of women.
Yeah, she really believes in that.
Yeah, and she makes a really good case for it.
It does.
It leads to healthier families, smarter children,
More prosperous communities.
more prosperous communities. And she even goes back and talks about, like the golden age of Islam,
Right.
where women were valued for their contributions,
Right.
and how that led to, intellectual and social flourishing.
Right.
And so it's really, this whole book is about recognizing the power of the female body.
Yep.
And how we can, empower women.
To benefit everyone.
Yeah, to benefit everyone. So Sarah, what would you say, just in your words, like what's the most striking thing about Bohannon's work in Eve?
Well, I think what's so fascinating is how she really puts the female body and its experiences right at the center of the story of evolution.
Yeah.
These experiences that have often been ignored or downplayed, and it really makes you question a lot of the assumptions that we have about the history of our species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for you, our listener, we hope that by diving deep into Eve with you today, that it's given you not just facts, but kind of a new way to look at the history of our species.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this book is a bestseller. It's full of these moments where you're like, oh, wow, I never thought about that.
Totally.
And it really leaves you with a really big question, which is, if so much of our understanding of biology and evolution has been based on this male norm, what else are we missing?
Right. What else don't we know?
What else don't we know? What other fundamental things are we overlooking?
Yeah,
So that's something to ponder.
it is.
And this has been Bookkast, your bestsellers in minutes.
Until next time.
Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring.